Yo, what is going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Backroom podcast. I'm Ryan, and as per usual, you guys always know we get a guest on the show every week just to come virtually sit down and talk with us. And this week, we're talking about Mortal Kombat 1999 because the new live action movie's coming out this Friday, and I couldn't be more excited. But honestly, I had to get a good friend to come on. So, Larry, introduce yourself, man.
Hi, yeah, my name is Larry, and I am a film reviewer on YouTube for the channel LC Screen Talk. Um, Not an avid gamer, but I definitely have played Mortal Kombat. So, um, it's been a hot minute since I watched this film, so I had to watch it again a couple days ago to refresh myself. But yeah.
Yeah, honestly, so I'm a massive gamer and I love the Mortal Kombat series, and I know a lot of people like have a serious problem with this film because I'm pretty sure it's PG-13. I have it up and it says it's PG-13, which blows my mind because you would never think anyone that you don't even need to play Mortal Kombat to just know that Mortal Kombat's brutal and disgusting. So, like going into this film, I'm just like, how the hell are they going to do a PG-13 Mortal Kombat film? And then I realized it was like Paul W. Anderson making this film, and then I didn't really need any more explanations because if anyone's seen a Paul W. Anderson film, we all know how that man directs. But I'll be honest, like video game adaptations really don't get the love and support that they really need. I guess if you asked anybody, they'd probably say Sonic would be the most or best comic book not even comic book. Jeez, I've been talking about that crap for like days now, but it feels good not to talk about comic book movies finally, but with video game movies. And this is what really started it all. I'm pretty sure that the first Mortal Kombat game came out in 1990 and this film came out 3 years later. So if you go back to this film, especially nowadays, it's comparable enough, but the vast majority of characters are just so much different now. There's so many different rosters of people. And going back to this movie, whew, I enjoyed it. It brings out the lovable kid side in me. I don't know about you, Larry. You didn't really say you had too much of a connection, but what did you get watching this film?
Yeah, I think this still ranks pretty high in terms of video game films. Now I'm down the comic book movie rabbit hole in my head.
Exactly.
That's all we ever talk about in general right now. um but no, I think it definitely ranks high in the video game landscape. Super Mario Brothers came out in 1993, and that was abysmal, like just really terrible. And I don't know if that one has gotten like a kinder retrospect from nostalgia, like Mortal Kombat kind of has, I think. But uh, just 2 years later, we get this first Mortal Kombat film, and it's just this like a huge improvement over something like Super Mario Brothers, and then also a huge improvement over Annihilation that would come. But yeah, in the time and up until probably Angelina Jolie's Tomb Raider, I mean, it was like the only good to decent video game adaptation we
Yeah,
had in film.
definitely.
Like, yeah. So even rewatching, I was nervous because I had not watched this movie in quite some time, but I did like it growing up. But no, I still think it's a lot of fun, and it accomplishes more or less what it needed to accomplish. And uh obviously some of the stuff it's a dated movie, certainly,
Very
but
dated.
uh
Very dated.
it gives you a story, but also gives you everything you're looking for in a Mortal Kombat film, with the phrases, the characters, the terminology, the bouncing, the like fight step bounce that happens when particularly particularly with homegirl Sonya Blade. Bridget Wilson does the like standing there bounce waiting to attack video game character thing, and I loved it.
That's the one thing that I truly do love about coming back to this movie is it's a very much product of the 90s. And it's the most obvious 90s film. Maybe actually no, I take that back. Annihilation is the most 90s film
Oh
of
my
any
gosh.
90s film. This is second to that. I'll give it that. But it honestly, the movie knows exactly what it's trying to do. And I think that's kind of what happened after this film came out with more of the comic book movies, specifically like you said, Super Mario Brothers. Hell, I'd even say like the third Tomb Raider movie. I only like the first one, to be honest, but like going on about that stuff, it's just insane that they don't have any fun. They don't really, they lack the fun and creativity. They're very studio derived and pushed, and we see like what happens. To go back to the comic book films, we see what happens when studios pretty much just meddle and don't really give too many directors the creative control that they deserve. And that was something that I read up on and was listening to an interview when looking into this movie a little bit more. Is Paul W.S. Anderson kind of just got to do whatever he wanted. And I think that shows in this film because this movie, the way it's made and structured, would only happen if Justice League 2.0 theatrical cut ever happened again. That's pretty much what would happen with this film. But I just think this film has just so much fun and energetic aesthetics along with it. It definitely encaptures those first three games very well. I know the fighting, for a lack of a better term, is kind of shit, but it only adds to the 90s cheesy nostalgia. And they perfectly casted this film, to be honest. I know a lot of people give this movie shit about Christopher Lambert being Lord Raiden and then like losing his powers at the end when he never really ever used them. But I do like Robin Shou as Liu Kang. I think that was a great casting. And Lyndon Ashby as Johnny Cage is probably one of the best adaptation castings, I would say, other than like the obvious Marvel and comic book casting people. Lyndon Ashby is Johnny Cage, and it truly hurts my feelings that they don't put Johnny in the new one. And then you've got Carrie Hiroki Tagawa as Shang Tsung, which was great again. Bridget Wilson, say what you want, the acting wasn't the greatest, but she definitely looked the role. And we have Talisa Soto as Katana, Trevor Goddard as Kano, Chris Kamasa as Scorpion, Francos Petit as Sub Zero, all these big characters. But I don't think they use them properly. But what do you think about this casting, Larry?
Yeah, I didn't actually know that Cameron Diaz originally was supposed to play Sonya Blade,
Yes.
but she got injured, so Bridget Wilson had to come in like last minute and take on the role and train to fight and everything. So the acting isn't great, but I think she sold her role, like the fighting wise. And as I said, she was the one who did that like bounce while she was like sitting there waiting to attack, which I just love that that was in there. But I think that Robin Shou is great as Liu Kang, and I think the fighting, a lot of it comes down to I don't know who they had as their like extras that they were working with, but I think a lot of it comes down to Paul W.S. Anderson because Robin Shou, I mean, he's a martial arts guy, so he did all of his own fighting and could clearly do it. So, but I do think he was great. Christopher Lambert, um, he almost feels I don't know. It was it's like a weird role. So he's like in a weird space for me because he almost feels like he doesn't fit, but then he perfectly fits. I don't know how to explain it, but his Raiden is strange. It's not my favorite, but I don't hate it. I agree. Johnny Cage, Lyndon Ashby is great in that role. He's definitely one of the standouts of this entire cast. And his charisma adds a lot to watching the film. But Kari Hiroyuki Tagawa is amazing. I mean, talk about like a camp villain that I love. I mean, he's iconic at this point. All these years later, and who's the gifts that we use or the images that we see from this Mortal Kombat film? It's him yelling down at people or giving that intimidating look that he just gives. He's so good. But Talisa Soto could have been okay as Katana if she was given a role.
Or anything to do.
Yeah, I mean, hers is definitely one that you're like, well, I mean, I can see it by looking at her. She looks like she could play the part, but we don't really get to see if she can play the part because she's not really given anything. And like you said, I mean, that definitely comes into play when we have like Scorpion and Sub Zero. But yeah, I think the cast overall is strong. The other one is actually Kano by Trevor Goddard, who I think is a
Yeah.
lot of fun. And in the same way of Lyndon Ashby, not as much, but he brought a lot of energy, like that I think the film needs. And then I think they just kill him too early. They should have kept him around because I think his energy was fun. So that's a problem with this film at large is they just like don't, like as you said, utilize these characters well.
Yeah, there was something that I found quite interesting about this film that honestly kind of shocked me. So, in the movie, Trevor Goddard, I don't know if the actor himself is Australian, but he portrayed an Australian Kano, and he was the first person to do that. It never originated in the games. And so, after his interpretation, that's why they started making him Australian in the future games and adaptations, which is why we're getting an Australian Kano in next week's version, which I thought was pretty cool. I definitely can't really recognize him without an Australian accent. But like you said, Larry, I think Kano is like one of the more fun characters when it comes to Mortal Kombat, just because he's kind of got that ridiculous laser eye beam. No one really knows how that thing really actually works when we think about it, but that's besides the point. He's very meta. He knows the situation he's in, and he just takes it for laughs and jokes. But he has this weird sexual tension with Sonya Blade. But you know what? My boy Johnny still gets her in the end. And then he dies by another actor in the next one. But you know what? That's completely besides the point. I think what like it comes down to with this film, when I say like negatives, I guess you can say, is in the games they weren't very well distinct with specific characters. Reptile, Sub-Zero, and Scorpion, they all relatively had the same outfit, just with a different color or color type pattern on their outfits to help differentiate them. Scorpion had red, Sub-Zero had blue, and Reptile had green. And I know for the early 90s games, at least, that's what needed to work because they don't have the technology that we have today where we can make everything look better than what our eyes can actually see at this point. But I don't think it translated too well over into live action. I felt very often that Scorpion, Sub Zero, and Reptile all kind of got side handled a little bit when they're easily some of the more enjoyable and more interesting characters when it comes to the universe of Mortal Kombat. Even more so for when this film came out, because like I said, they've only been like 2 or 3 games at this point, maybe even almost coming out with the second one. And they had nothing really to work off of. So I wish maybe Paul W.S. Anderson maybe did the designs differently better for those characters. And this film definitely could have been shoved out another 40 minutes, I'd say. But this is the 90s. They didn't really know what runtime was back then. They just said whatever we can explode and have 2 characters bang with within an hour, 40 minutes. Boom. That's a fucking movie. But that goes to my point that whenever they showed up in this film, it was kind of just boring and stale. And to add on to your point earlier, Larry, when it comes down to their combat, I don't know if I'm being too critical or looking into this too much, but maybe it's just a meta joke because that's how people play the game. That they just stand in the same spot and just throw roundhouse kicks because they can't learn the fucking mechanics yet. So thinking about it, maybe they're just throwing jokes at us because honestly, we've all been to that point. And I've played with Amanda. That's exactly what she does. That's besides the point though on this. Did you get like any kind of meta joke like that? Do you think that Paul W.S. Anderson was like trying to throw some jokes at the player base at the time because it was like a very third dimensional game?
Well, this I think there's a lot of meta in here. So it certainly wouldn't surprise me from the dialogue to just like I said, the bouncing, all of this stuff I think is very meta, and the the script itself wanes. I think when it goes away from being meta is where it really starts to falter. But when it's just being fun, it works. So I wouldn't be shocked. I also wouldn't be shocked if that was just what Paul W.S. Anderson delivered. Looking at knowing his filmography,
Yeah.
I don't I don't know how much credit to give.
It's
I
so
mean,
weird. Dude, Paul
yeah,
W.S.
because
Anderson is just a weird director.
I don't think he did all of that with like certainly not the sequels, but even Resident Evil. The first one I think is somewhat successful, but I don't know. Part of me thinks he lost even some of the fun of this film with that series, including the first one. So I don't know.
Yeah, I know when it came to the first one and then after to the second one, Paul W.S. Anderson actually didn't do the second one at all. I think it was what's her name? John R. Leonetti directed the second one, and I think he was part of the writer on that one because after the this one, I think Paul W.S. Anderson went on to do Event Horizon, but then later regretted that he kind of wanted to do a sequel to this, which honestly anything would have been better than the sequel to this movie,
Oh
but
my
that's
god.
completely besides the point. And I think the kind of charm to this film, since we're kind of shitting on the sequel a little bit, is the visual effects in this movie. This movie gets a lot of crap for its visual effects, and I will admit the reptile and the underworld kind of route, the other world that they go to fight Shang Tsung, it doesn't look the best. I'll agree, but at least it's not V clipping in between the person and the green screen. That's what I'll give this movie. I will give this movie that, but it also goes back to my whole thing about it being a product of its time because this just feels like a 90s video game ripped out from their screen in an arcade. And I think this movie accomplished exactly what it wanted to do, and with me, at least, I think that's why I do enjoy going back to this film once in a while. And even though it's not rated R, I definitely think they could have done more when it comes to fatalities and brutalities. I don't think they had to be violent, but anything could have been better than what they did. Like, bro, you trip someone in the sand, he's like, oh no, I give up. Then Shang Tsung's like, fatality, as like some really epic music zooms in on his face at the same time, and then you're like, oh man, wait for it, and all he does is just like suck his soul out of his body, and I'm just like, what the fuck, bro? You should have just
Yeah.
taken his neck out of his asshole. Like this is exactly what should have been going on in my book. And I think that's where my biggest criticism is for the film, other than the design of like Sub-Zero, Reptile, and Scorpion, is overall the movie is kind of inconsistent, like you said, Larry. I feel like once you start the movie, going into the middle, you get where this movie is going, and then I just thought about this. I shit you not, they literally add a black character in this film just to kill off 40 minutes in without any depth or anything when they had Jax with Sonya Blade in the middle of this film and they could have used him and build his storyline up into the sequel since they did that. Like that bothers me so much, and I just remembered it. I don't know
Yeah.
if you noticed that was Jax in the beginning of the film at all.
I know he has like what, a scene?
Exactly, of them just like stalking the boat to go to Mortal Kombat.
Yeah.
Like
uh,
what? Like, bro, you have Jax, but you still just put this fourth character African American dude that you give no screen time to, that's not known, no one cares about him, just to kill him by Goro, which I do admit looks pretty fucking cool in this movie for the not for 90s animatronics at least. I don't know how you feel
okay.
about Goro.
I mean, Goro is ridiculous and fun. The animatronics, you know, I heard that they had obviously a lot of difficulty with that animatronic, and not all the facial expressions are working or whatever, but like when you set Goro up against like Reptile roaming around here in whatever CGI that was, I mean, I'll take Goro, so
Yeah, I know people give Goro a lot of shit just because he doesn't move very well. But dude, I give the makeup and visual effects team so much credit for making Goro look as good as he did. Because when he was standing and sitting, if they made his eyebrows or eyelashes just like a little bit thicker, his eyes would have looked a lot like just much better in my opinion. But that's like completely besides the point. Like when he's sitting down and not moving all four limbs, all six limbs of his, he looks really good. It's only when he starts fighting you really start noticing the trouble when it comes to them maneuvering his movement, just because of how Paul W.S. Anderson cuts these scenes. Oh, dude, they're so bad. They're so bad. Just
yeah, I
like
mean,
the scorpion scene when he's like the get over here line, and bro, I don't even know what the fuck that was that came out of his hand.
I have to
It
say
just
that's the other weird thing is what they switched Scorpion's hand to. I don't.
bro, I
Well,
think they took the name Scorpion a little too literally. Um, like,
it's
bro,
like,
you don't
what
need
is
to have an
that?
actual scorpion coming out of his hand. It's a metal fucking chain.
I mean,
Like,
again, it's the '90s, so I give it a little bit of pass. That CGI was a little bit rough too. That overlay of like the scorpion coming out of his hand, um, which is weird because for a film like this, they could have just done had some like contraptment to his arm or something where it came out of rather than straight from his hand, and I think it would have been fine. But that's the big bummer thing because I mean, I obviously Scorpion's an iconic Mortal Kombat character. He's my favorite. That's the one I always
hell
played
yeah.
as when I played with Scorpion. Um, and he's such so iconic, and I'll say he gets the better fight between he and Sub Zero.
Definitely.
But because their fight is kind of fun. Sub Zero's fight is pretty stupid, and I don't know why they killed Sub Zero with ice. It was a choice. I think it was very strange. I was like, what? We we just killed him with ice. I don't know, but um a reptile's fight is actually pretty fun too when he actually becomes like a human and fights Liu Kang at the end. But yeah, those characters we mentioned her Katana, she doesn't even have her like fan blades, she doesn't even have her weapon. Never pulls it out. She has no, like you said, no characterization. She's kind of just a exposition girl walking around here when when Raiden's not giving us the exposition, Katana is. Um, Another thing is Sonya is a fine in the first two acts, but then they just added the clear blue, make her some damsel in distress in the third act, just like chain her up, and you're like, what? I thought she came here. I thought he was gonna fight her. Why? I mean, even if she refuses, I don't know. She's in a different outfit. They tried to pull like some slave Leia mess or something, like putting her in that little dress outfit and like plumping up her hair. When we see her in the other world, I was like, uh, okay. I don't know why this just happened, but and then we mentioned Kano. He's so fun, and they just kill him too early. So it's a lot of these characters, and they they put in place instead like Liu Kang's brother story, which I know we have to have like a motivation for characters and like have a reason, and that was his reason. Eh, I have to say, like that kind of stuff was my least favorite. I don't know. I was like, we could have just, I don't know, made it more straightforward. I didn't need all this little kid brother
No,
backstory.
no, yeah, definitely. I remember it took me a few times to like even realize because in the story they don't really give you any detail on his brother other than that one scene of him dying. It
Yeah,
took me a few rewatches to finally understand that he actually died in the Mortal Kombat, and that's what happens. Like
yeah,
it's so abrupt and just so out there that you just think Shang Tsung out of nowhere just like, "Hey, I'm murdering your brother cuz
yeah,
fuck you. We need a movie." That's why. That's what it really felt like. And I give all the actors super good credit because they did with what they needed to. They didn't have much to work off of, especially with W.S. Anderson. I can only imagine what type of directing he was giving them. But like I said, I give a lot of effort or credit to Robin Shue, Lyndon Ashby, Karaoke Tagwa, Bridget Wilson, and all the good actors in this film. I mean, I like Christopher Lambert, but definitely miscasted in this film. And I think as we were talking about this movie, another thing that really sets this movie apart and really doesn't make it feel like a Mortal Kombat film for many people, I'd say, is when they're fighting, they're just very generic fights, sort of like what we
yeah.
said earlier about them just standing and doing like a bunch of roundhouse kicks, not actually doing anything but smacking Casper the Ghost with the heel of their foot. Like, come on, dude. The only thing they do when they fight is when Johnny Cage punts Goro in the nuts and he does the split. I think that's the only game move variant that we saw in the live action version of this. Everything else was pretty bare bones, just fighting. Even Kano, like the dude has a fucking laser eye, and he just
Yeah.
lets Sonya roundhouse kicks him and choke him out with her legs, like in 5 seconds. Like, bro, try and melt her feet off. Have you ever thought about that? Like, it makes no sense to me.
And I don't know if some of the stuff isn't like more CGI budget. Yeah. Speaking of, Sub Zero, I mean, he kind of throws up like a quick little ice thing in his final battle, and then
That's
that's
what
it.
you want to call that.
I don't. It just so
It
you're
looked like the
like,
orb of
dude,
life.
yeah, what's going on here? Like,
No, I think that's what I give this movie credit for though too. Because if you notice, especially when you compare this one to the sequel, is this movie is a lot of not just visual effects. A lot of it is made for the movie. All of it's practical.
yeah,
Which I do give a lot of credit, and they obviously have to do like the visual effects for like the Sub Zero moves, the Scorpion stuff, the stuff you can't really do live action for that time at least. I'd say or practically. So I give Paul W.S. Anderson a lot of credit for trying to make this film a little bit more grounded per se, because I feel like back in the 90s, people weren't ready for this Mortal Kombat hard R stuff because I can't see a Mortal Kombat film not be good, or wait, no, it has to be good to be really violent or really violent to be good, because we've seen with this one in the sequel that you can't do it unviolently without getting that factor of joy being like, yeah, bro, I did that in the fucking game and it looks even cooler when it's done to a person in real life. But wait, that's the joke. They're not actually dead. So getting the satisfaction of actually doing those finishing moves and brutalities were kind of taken away from the audience, which I would say is the highlight of the games. Obviously, when we talk about Mortal Kombat, we talk about the cool characters, the designs, the story, but when we talk about them, we talk about those brutalities, those finishers, those fatalities. Like they're so unique and character specific. Those brutalities and moves are what also give the characters their persona and their identity within this universe. And I feel like that's one of the biggest problems is they scrapped that away and took it away from a lot of these characters like Kano with the laser eye, Liu Kang with the fire, Kano with his laser blast, Sonya Blade with her wrist blasters. Like there's so many things that they could have done practically, I feel like in this, but for some reason they didn't. I guess they spent all their money on the reptile CGI and the orb of life possibly, but I just feel like that's the biggest fault of this movie, and that's the biggest character takeout from when they're translating from video game to comic books or not. Fuck. Why do I keep saying Honestly, I'll just say it's just been a long day for comic book film Twitter people. It's just on our minds constantly. But I'm talking about from game to on live action version of that. But Larry, would you agree? What do you say towards that?
Yeah, I think, like you said, that was one of the things people got hyped for with this 2021 Mortal Kombat, with the trailer that we received initially, and what people actually got excited about. Sorry, was the brutality. Seeing Sub Zero make a spear out of ice and out of a blood and kill someone with it. Like that's the
Yeah.
kind of over the top, brutal craziness that you really want with a Mortal Kombat movie. And hopefully, since it is rated R, this upcoming film delivers that, delivers like brutal kills. Because certainly have you have just kind of like sparring matches that end with a guy just yelling fatality, and you're like, well, was it? I don't think so, but I'll take your word, I guess. Oh, you're stealing his soul. Okay. Um and like I said, I think the fighting could have been good because I think some of these actors are certainly capable of it. But then we have Paul W.S. Anderson, and his directing style is very like frenetic with when the action scenes. And not in the action. His directing is pretty just kind of flat, but um, I guess that's what we expect these days. In honesty, though, I think Mortal Kombat is one of his better films. I think it ranks near the top of the Paul W.S. Anderson pile. Um,
Definitely.
yeah, so I think it's a weird thing because you don't want to go Super Mario Brothers, which tried to strip everything from the game. Like they didn't know how to adapt any of that stuff. They didn't know how to add in that video game fun and flavor at all, and tried to make it awkwardly, real to life while also being like ridiculous. Whereas I think this film, at the least, is able to strike more of that balance of at least giving the fans enough of what they expect, enough of what they wanted from the game. But yeah, they still weren't able to push it to what would have really set it over the edge as maybe the best comic. I mean, oh, damn it. The best video game adaptation. Um, so yeah, it's fun. It definitely doesn't go all the way, but I think it's a fun time.
No, yeah, I honestly agree with you, Larry. This film does try its hardest and it does succeed in certain aspects. And to what you were saying on Paul W.S. Anderson and the way he was filming his fights, if you like really pay attention for anybody listening, you can tell when he's not filming someone with fighting background. Whenever you see a fight with Liu Kang or Johnny Cage, you always notice that they're pretty fluent in their movements and the camera's not doing much because Paul W. Anderson doesn't have to hide very much because Robin Show and Lyndon Ashby are both really good martial artists. I'm pretty sure Lyndon Ashby is a black belt, actually. So I definitely think getting that authenticity helped in the benefact of those two characters alone. It just shows that they're much more genuine and that they can actually possibly be these characters that we're seeing on the screen. Because like you said with Super Mario Bros, the only thing that you would say that is Super Mario Bros about that is literally their names and slight character design between Mario and Luigi if we're just looking at a height and mustache. But that other than that, that's not a Super Mario film. At least when we're looking at Mortal Kombat, we can kind of go through check marks of what they did, what they put in there, what they could have used. Like it still feels like a Mortal Kombat title and it feels like it fits in that universe, which I think personally is why I do like this film. But is there anything that we forgot to mention? Any little things you caught in this movie, Larry, before we like give our final thoughts and stuff?
Um, Not really that I can think. We did talk about him, but I also wanted to just give a shout out to Kevin Michael Richardson, who is Goro, because I think he hammed it up perfectly to like play the
No,
role.
definitely.
I mean,
Yeah.
he's obviously having a lot of fun and brings that character to a level that even if you're like, this looks kind of weird as he's like fighting, it's still fun. So shout out to him.
Yeah, I
And
definitely appreciate the work they put into Goro.
yeah, and again, it's easy to look back from 2021 when we have, the Avengers and we have all these other films that have 200 to 300 million dollar budgets, and of course they look great, but even those films, as soon as they're released, when they spent $100 million on them, have a couple spots where you're like, that didn't look great. So, looking back at this 1995 video game movie, of course, it's not going to look great
Yeah,
anymore. You know, I don't know. And then I will say some stuff, particularly that stuff with Reptile, um, even by mid 90s standards,
it's still
already
not good.
did not look good. Other 90s films already were years and years ahead of some of the stuff we saw in here.
No,
But
yeah.
the only other precedent we had really was Super Mario Brothers. Like
Ew.
there weren't video game movies. I mean, video games as a platform by the mid 90s had started to finally, branch out and get more consoles. But before this, throughout like the 80s, it was, the Pac-Mans and Battlestar like that type of gaming consoles. So we were just branching into this new arena of video game culture, and this is one of the very first adaptations for film. So I think, given all of the circumstance, I really do think that they did a good job considering.
No, yeah. I was curious about what the numbers, the budget of this film were. So this movie cost $18 million to create. And I'll be damned. I'm impressed what they did with $18 million on that set for what they did. Just because they did more of that practical work. And this movie was a hit actually when it came out.
Hmm.
It did a worldwide gross by the end of its box office run with $122 million in 1995. $122 million doesn't look like a lot now, but back in 1995, that I think that's the equivalent of like 350 million nowadays if you adjust for inflation and stuff like that. So I give a bunch of credit to this movie for at least achieving the fan base, reaching out to those people and getting them to come out to the theater and see this movie because this is a part of my childhood. I love watching this movie. I don't watch it every year. I watch it when you know what I'm just like I need a good uh, video game movie to watch because we don't have very many. Sonic is good, I guess you can say, but that's for a
You
very
don't
specific audience.
sound very enthusiastic when you say
Yeah,
that.
that but it's a very specific audience for that film. I appreciate the fuck that they actually listened to their audience when it came to
Yes.
the design of Sonic. But like you said,
The
Super Mario
Oscars
isn't
are
good.
super shady for not nominating it for best visual effects. Those visual artists who went out of business because of this and the pandemic should have gotten a visual effects nomination for their work.
No,
Especially in this
yeah,
year where we have a lot of random movies that got a
dude,
visual
like
effects
Love and
nomination.
Monsters was the last thing I was expecting to see in the Oscars for best
I
visual
mean,
effects this year. I mean,
yeah,
it's
we
good.
could have
Don't get me
thrown
wrong.
a bone to Sonic at the least, just because I mean
Yeah,
the work that they had to do last minute to like I mean basically the entire success of the film hinged on the visual effects team
yeah, they pushed
showing up
it back
to do
like
it.
3 or 4 months. It went from like November to
Yeah.
February just so they could fix the Sonic design.
I
Man,
think
dude.
video game movies get no respect because another movie that I think should have gotten a visual effects was Detective Pikachu. Should have
Yes.
gotten a visual effects nomination, and it was
No, yeah,
just
I
chilling.
totally agree. Detective, I will admit, over the years, the video game genre movies have been getting better and better, and I think Detective Pikachu was the start of that. I actually really enjoyed Detective
I
Pikachu.
love
I'm a
Detective Pikachu.
massive Pokemon fan.
Yes, me
I
too.
love Sonic, but I that movie definitely was catered for a specific audience. Not my cup of tea there, but overall, I thought it was a good movie. I'm excited to see Tails in the sequel, so I give it that. And honestly, I'm really excited for Mortal Kombat next week. I think.
Uh,
Oh, you're not?
no, I am. I am.
Oh, okay. I thought you were like, oh man, I'm not, dude.
I'm
I'm just
hoping.
like
I mean,
so
I've heard
excited.
like slight stuff. I try. I mean, it's impossible. That's the worst part about Twitter. I have to say is for
Yes.
me. Is I don't like to see all those reactions. I don't like to hear all this stuff before I watch a film.
No,
And
yeah, I
generally,
agree.
like I don't listen to reviews until I've seen it. I use reviews as like talking, like as a comparison to like hear what other people thought of something rather than a recommendation because I watch pretty much everything. So I don't really need a recommendation to go watch something. I'm gonna watch it whether it gets good reviews or not.
No,
And
yeah.
probably review it myself. But so I don't like hearing those first reactions. I don't like hearing all that, and it's impossible if you're on Twitter to avoid them because they're just
To avoid
everywhere.
even YouTube nowadays, it's becoming almost impossible to avoid them with the
Also,
whole.
oh god, sorry, Warner Brothers, get it together. This this release strategy is terrible. And I don't know, I know that distribution is the problem with releasing films worldwide at the same time is particularly some companies don't have worldwide distribution so they have to find other companies to put it out in some countries. However, that's not the case with you, Disney. And I'm pretty positive that's not the case with you either, Warner Brothers. Both of you have the ability to release things worldwide at the same time. And yet you never do. So I don't ever understand. But right now, with Warner Brothers, this is the second film in a row after Godzilla vs. Kong that they released overseas first and then kept the embargo randomly until after its release date international, but right before its release date in the States. Meanwhile, there are clips of the film all over YouTube and all over the internet already. Like, you don't even you could just look at Mortal Kombat in the YouTube bar and you're gonna find like
The whole
legitimate
movie.
just filming of the movie. So it's
Yeah.
just so dumb.
No, I honestly agree, especially with the whole HBO Max deal. I know they're trying to coincide it with the theatrical release, but I feel like that's just their undoing nowadays. With that, is trying to keep the two coming out at the same time, theatrical and HBO Max. But honestly, we saw it with Justice League too, dude. They quote unquote put Justice League Snyder Cut in Tom and Jerry my ass. Um, like I don't know what goes on when it comes to them releasing things virtually. Like at least every release they have done so far after Wonder Woman 84 has either been leaked or most of the information is just known about it already through drama. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah, I'm sorry. If there's, which I don't think there are at this point, which is weird to me if you like vehemently defend a studio. But Warner Brothers is the worst run studio. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
it's how I see it. I think they are the worst run movie studio. People can rag on Disney, and I know they get a lot of crap for being, virtually a monopoly almost at this point, and they
They have
deserve the
like respect for
criticism
their
they get.
fans.
But yeah, they are so much better run. Warner Brothers would do good by stop trying to copy their films and how they do their films and start copying their business model and get it together, because
Yeah, I
this
find
is
it
not it.
I find it really weird. Not to go too far off topic for myself at least. Yesterday I was on Twitter and next thing you know, every person has seen In the Heights already. And that film doesn't even come out till June at this point. Now I get a lot of people can say, "Oh, but it's In the Heights, it's a musical. No one wants to spoil it." But just like the whole general thing that you do, Larry, is I don't like hearing or seeing reviews before I go to see something. I used to when I was younger, but over time, I just feel like it kind of fogged my opinion a little bit more. And then I just started watching them after I watched the movie just to see what things I agree on, what things I disagree on. Maybe I just didn't see something or thought something that way. Maybe I get someone else to explain it to me and not get them to explain it before I even see it. So when I go in, the whole gist. And it just
Yeah.
aggravates me that Warner Brothers is publishing all these titles super early to I want to say critics, but honestly, watching how the Justice League review happened, how Godzilla versus Kong happened, I'm pretty sure they're just giving these to anybody at this point, and it just it's becoming bothersome. And I know you said you saw some with Mortal Kombat. I haven't, thankfully, but that's just something that I keep dreading, especially for these bigger titles.
Yeah, especially, yeah, because Mortal Kombat's already out everywhere, in
Yeah, I
most of the
heard
world.
that.
It's already
Yeah,
released.
like, why can't you guys just give it to us on HBO
And then they
Max
push it
already?
back a week for us. Like after so they release it at the same time, early April, and then it got pushed back, and I don't know why it got pushed back. There's
They
not.
said to give Godzilla versus Kong a little bit more breathing room, but
I
if you're already
mean, I
gonna
guess.
publish it in other countries
Yeah.
like China and stuff like that, bro, fucking just do it here.
Or
I
why?
don't.
I mean, if that's the case, why didn't they give Godzilla more breathing room everywhere else too? Like it was Godzilla vs Kong is killing it in China. So
Yeah,
I know
dude,
that.
it's an dude. It's making so much money. I'm so happy.
Yeah, me too. And I mean, Mortal Kombat's not going to come near those type of numbers.
Honestly, I don't think I think Godzilla versus Kong might max at 500 mil when it comes to its end. I think Mortal Kombat has the potential to get 200.
Yeah,
Honestly,
I think it'll do well. Um, I definitely think it's one of those movies where people will be just nervous enough, like the casual, like will be nervous enough to be like, you know what, let me just watch it on HBO Max because I don't know.
no, yeah, this movie it's already grossed
Yeah,
$11 million. So once it reaches the states, once it reaches, well, I can't really say Canada in the theater because Canada is like under lockdown again and all that
and
fun
that's the other
stuff.
thing. Yeah, all these domestic numbers aren't including Canada right now. Usually, Canada is lumped into the domestic
Yeah,
box
none of this is
office.
Canada, dude. Canada is
I
doing
mean, we
all at home
finally,
PVOD and stuff.
yeah, we
So to
finally
see
have
these
New York
numbers,
and LA to start working with our number, but we still don't have Canada.
yeah, that's gonna be a while too. It looks like with the way things are going over there and stuff like
Whoop.
that.
Sorry, Canada.
Sorry,
Well,
Canada.
speaking
With
of Warner Brothers being terrible.
yeah,
That's the other thing. HBO Max is only in the United States, not in
dude, I
Canada,
know.
nowhere else in the world. So they're doing all of these things in a place like Canada right now, who is just ravaged with COVID, is not getting that vaccine out to people, and their theaters are closed, but then they also don't have HBO Max. So the whole point of doing this, release it on the same day in both theaters and on HBO Max, I mean, it's a moot point in some of these countries that need it. Like they need
Yeah.
HBO Max so they can watch the movies, and they don't have it because you all rushed this HBO Max like rollout last year horribly. I mean, that
Yeah,
talk about
they
again
definitely rushed
a
it.
horrible rollout. Like
No, yeah, I
HBO
think a lot
Max's
of it
debut was terrible.
I think a lot of it has to do with the Snyder Cut too, because the Snyder Cut was announced like a few weeks before HBO Max officially rolled out, and I think that caught them off guard a little bit.
I really think they should have just debuted it with the Snyder Cut, so they would have had like original content ready to go. But
Yeah,
I mean, I don't know.
I've noticed in the pandemic POVD and streaming era right now that we're in, films don't have the longevity that they did then when they were just solely in theaters. I feel like Godzilla versus Kong conversation kind of stopped a week and a half after, maybe a week. I
And that's been
haven't
like
really
the
heard.
most hype out of
Yeah, and
any
that's
of the
the most
films,
hyped. So I think they're going about it wrong, and I
other than
really hope
Snyder
people
Cut,
are
but
still excited for
that'll
Mortal
never
Kombat,
stop.
dude, because I really do have high hopes for this film, and I hope they make like a little nod to the first film. And I gotta say, when they scream the Mortal Kombat thing, Mortal Kombat, it's the most obnoxious and absurd thing that they just randomly put. Like they'll just be having a random conversation, like this giant exposition dumped over them. Next thing you know, some dude screaming Mortal Kombat, and then like Scorpion or Sub Zero just jumps out of thin air, and you're like, oh wait, what the fuck? Okay, it's so absurd, and I just find it so fun, and I think that's why I undoubtedly love this film at the end of the day. Yeah, when you look at it and really want to dissect it, it really isn't a good film. It's a Paul W.S. Anderson film, if I really had to tell you what I'd want to rank it under in genre wise. Paul W.S. Anderson has his own genre at this point. It's like fake horror. That's exactly how I'd put it. Is his comedy,
Yeah.
is his genre. But this movie is just fun. It came out in the mid 90s. That's when they were really experimenting with a bunch of stuff. This is an obvious version of fucking Frankenstein's monster, I would call it. But I love this film. It's a good childhood memory. I definitely recommend this film to anybody. I'm pretty sure most people probably have to watch it, but this is definitely a film that, hell, I would even let kids watch just because it's not really even that violent like a Mortal Kombat
No.
series should be. It's a fun comedic adventure. The movie knows exactly what it wants to be. I'm gonna be a little generous. I'm gonna give this movie a 7 out of 10 just because of how fun, and it's truly the first good video game adaptation on the silver screen. But Larry, what are your final thoughts about this film, and what would you rank it?
Yeah, I think like we were talking about earlier, it really held up the video game adaptation for a long time. I would say up until Angelina Jolie's Tomb Raider came along, this was like the only decent one that we we had to look at, unless you're counting, Pokemon the first movie or something. But it's not so much a video game adaptation as a video game property made into a film. Um, but this was really the beacon of this subgenre, and even after the Tomb Raider films, it would be a long time before we got another one that was any good at all. So even now it ranks among the ones, if I were to do a top video game adaptation list, I mean, this is going to be pretty high on my list, just because they understood the assignment more or less. They were confined by treading new territory, finding a way to break into this untapped market with the video game adaptations, with the budget being what it was, and the risk that it was to make a Mortal Kombat film, because they are brutal video games that you want to find that appeal to younger people who are the demographic. Certainly in the 90s, video games were only for, young people, and but still make it brutal for the audience that knows what the games are about. But it's a lot of fun. The cast do what they can with what they're given. They add enough nods in here straight to the fans of the game and deliver an enjoyable time, an outdated, cheesy, enjoyable film. So, for what it is, I'm going to give Mortal Kombat a 6 out of 10.
Oh man, I absolutely love this film. It was great talking to you, Larry, today about it
Yeah,
and all the
thank you.
mishaps HBO and Warner Brothers have been getting into. Where can we find you?
Yeah, you can find me on YouTube as well as Twitter and Instagram, all at LC Screen Talk.
And thank you guys so much for coming out, chilling in the back room, listening to our podcast, and having a great time for us. Don't forget to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.